Welcome back to the Crypto Channel, everyone. My name is Josh, and right now, Bitcoin is continuing to show weakness in the short term, potentially about to soon retest this crucial area of support as we're continuing to see more and more liquidity building just below the price of Bitcoin that we need to pay attention to. So I'll be talking about that in just a moment alongside Ethereum, which is now bouncing and holding this crucial area of support in the short term, while the price of Solana is potentially on its way towards retesting this crucial area of support as we're now playing out this short-term bearish signal. So I'll be talking about all of that and more later in the video, so definitely watch to the end. First of all, starting off on the weekly Bitcoin price chart, and the super trend indicator is still sitting in the red, indicating a larger bear market or a larger correction in the price of Bitcoin. And we're technically still playing out this massive bearish divergence on the weekly time frame as well. But with that being said, over the last few weeks or so, we are now entering into oversold territories in the weekly Bitcoin RSI, which is a sign that we could start to see a bit more of a relief at some stage, a bit of a break from all of the bearish price action on the larger time frames, maybe over the next few weeks or so. Kind of like what we saw the last time we saw this oversold signal on the weekly Bitcoin RSI, which was around July 2022. And over the next few weeks, we did see a bit of a relief, finally a bit of a break from the bearish price action. But it's important to understand this is not necessarily a bottom signal. It's possible we can ultimately go lower later on to continue the larger bearish trend. So that is still the situation on the larger timeframes, on the weekly time frame. And if we're taking a look at the 3-day Bitcoin price chart, of course, right now the price of Bitcoin is still bouncing in this range right here between this support and this resistance. First of all, we still have strong resistance sitting in between around 72,000 to 76,000. So continue to expect the price to struggle in that area, possibly see rejections from that area as we just saw over the last few days. And as for support, we do have some short-term support here at around 63,000, give or take. We have a key level and a psychological level of support sitting at around 60,000, and more support in this area in between 53,000 to 56,000. And it is quite likely that in the coming days, possibly even another few weeks, the price is likely going to remain in this range right here, bouncing between this support and this resistance, but potentially still in a similar situation right now compared to what we saw around end of 2025, entering into very early this year, which was a bit of a relief, mostly choppy sideways price action, slightly leaning towards the bullish direction that lasted for a bit over a month. In fact, for almost a month and a half, give or take. But remember, that occurred during this much larger multi-month bearish trend. So once again, that is still the situation on the 3-day time frame. And if we're zooming further into the short term, taking a look at the 4-hour Bitcoin price chart, of course, we've been playing out this overbought signal over the last few days or so, resetting in the short term, resetting the RSI. And like I said in my last video, we broke back below this previous point of resistance here, which was a possible point of support. But obviously, now that we've broken back below that area, are now once again expect a resistance at that area, which is sitting in between around 69,000 to 69.5k. And if the price can eventually get back above that area, in that situation, I'd expect more resistance closer towards 71 to 72,000, which is of course the low end of this significant area of resistance at give or take 72,000. And as for support, we have a very small amount of support we're finding right now at this level just here, sitting at around 67,000. But really the next important area of support, at least in the short term, is sitting at around 65.5k to 66,000 in that area right there. And if the price of Bitcoin actually confirms a break below that area, and especially if we fail to get back above that area, in that situation, would likely see a retracement back down towards the local lows, towards the lower end of this massive range right here on the 3-day time frame, which is sitting in the lower 60k area. So in this case, we're talking about around 62,500 to 63,000 as the next significant area of support if we first confirm a break below 65.5k to 66,000, which is the immediate support to pay attention to if we continue this slight little pullback here. And it is actually quite likely that in the coming hours, maybe over the next day or so, it's likely we'll continue to show a bit of weakness in the short term, not necessarily a huge crash, but basically a bit of weakness, lacking bullish momentum, quite possibly a little bit more of a pullback, getting closer towards these points of support to retest support. And I'm saying that due due to the fact that we have major liquidity building just below the price of Bitcoin that we need to pay attention to. First of all, we have a level sitting at around 66.4 to 66.5K. We have a major area sitting in between 65.8K to 66,000. So basically at give or take 66,000, we have a lot of liquidity slightly either side of 66,000, and we have more liquidity as well building at give or take 65,000. But really that 66K level is the key level to watch out for in the immediate short term in terms of price targets, because as always, no guarantees, but usually the price of Bitcoin tends to move towards where we have a lot of liquidity. So we could see almost a week ago, as we could see back here, the price of Bitcoin was going towards the upside to wipe out the liquidity that was building above the price of Bitcoin, because we didn't really have a lot of liquidity below the price back then. But after we already wiped out that upside liquidity, obviously we started building liquidity towards the downside, which means of course the price is very likely going to go towards the downside to wipe out these areas. And so these are the next areas that are not yet wiped out, but could likely, as always, no guarantees, very likely soon be wiped out at give or take 66,000. And so once again, it's a very likely scenario, as always, no guarantees, but very likely that, let's just say over the next day or so, 1 to 2 days, we'll continue to show a bit of weakness in the shorter term, quite possibly just a slight little pullback, simply just to wipe out that liquidity. And then of course, we have this area of support here that I mentioned earlier, which means it's possible we could see some sort of bounce around that area. And of course, the US stock market opens back up again tomorrow. So as always, pay attention to what the stock market does, and I will keep you up to date here on the channel as always every single day. So depending on what the stock market does when it opens up tomorrow, that can also influence what direction the price goes. But between now and then, over the next 12 to 24 hours, once again, just expect a little more weakness, a lot of indecisiveness in the shorter term, but slightly leaning towards the bearish direction is ultimately my prediction in the immediate short term. But remember, all of these short-term moves are still occurring within this larger range, which is occurring within a much larger bearish trend. So that is still the situation across all of these different timeframes and the key levels and price targets to watch out for moving forward. And if you want to trade any of these moves in the price of Bitcoin or any crypto, you need to be set up ready to go on a crypto exchange. And if you use the first link below the video in the description and in the pinned comment, the first link below this video will take you to this page right here over on the 2bit crypto exchange, which by the way is a no KYC exchange and is an exchange that I personally use myself from time to time. And simply just by making your account using that first link below the video, once again, you can see on this page right here that for a limited time, there's a 3.5 million USDT prize pool going on right now. Simply just by trading crypto, you can take advantage of potentially a major portion of this prize pool right here. It's split up between a bunch of different pools right here. So based on how you're trading, you can potentially come away with extra prize money here simply just by trading crypto. So obviously, if you're going to be trading crypto anyway, you might as well check this out. Take advantage of this. Once again, first link below the video. And on top of that, if you use that first link below the video, but only if you use that link, there's also extra exclusive bonuses only available using that link. Just by trading crypto, you can get extra, essentially free USDT into your account from trading crypto. So once again, if you're going to be trading crypto anyway, you might as well check this out. Once again, first link below the video to 2bit. And remember, 2bit is also a no KYC exchange. But with that being said, taking a quick look at the Bitcoin dominance chart on the daily time frame, and right now the Bitcoin dominance in terms of the overall trend or momentum is still looking relatively neutral. Of course, we can see short-term bullish moves and short-term bearish moves, but for the most part, we're kind of just bouncing around relatively sideways on the price chart on the daily Bitcoin dominance chart, which means a lot of the major altcoins will still likely perform very similar to whatever Bitcoin does. So keep that in mind. And if we're taking a look at Ethereum on the 3-day time frame, obviously it's an almost identical situation for Ethereum on the 3-day time frame as what we could see here for Bitcoin on the 3-day time frame. Once again, the larger multi-month trend technically still bearish, but the short to mid-term situation is still very similar to what we saw around December 2025, give or take, which was mostly choppy sideways price action, but slightly leaning towards the bullish direction, as we could see, having just a bit of a relief from the larger bearish trend, but not necessarily confirming the end or the reversal out of that larger bearish trend. And so all of that's still going on the 3-day time frame. And if we're taking a look at the daily Ethereum price chart, the key support and resistance to watch out for moving forward is, of course, this same support level here, sitting at just above 1.8k, more specifically around 1810 to 1820, acting as crucial support to pay attention to. And as for resistance, we have a lot of resistance in between, around 2150 to 2250. So continue to expect a lot of resistance, a lot of struggle, and likely rejections from around that area on the price chart, as we saw just a few days ago, around half a week ago. But the good news is, at least so far, despite the current short-term rejection, we're still just bouncing around in a bit of a sideways price range, as we can see, and as we've been seeing for over a month now. As I've been talking about every day for the last 1 month now, we're basically just bouncing around in a bit of a sideways price range between support and resistance. So that is still the situation on the daily time frame, but remember, that is occurring during a much larger bearish trend, kind of like what we saw just here. And if we're zooming further into the short term, looking at the very short term moves, of course, on the 4-hour time frame, we can see that right now and over the last few days, we have been pulling back, playing out an overbought signal, but we have reset the RSI now, and we're actually closer towards oversold than we are towards overbought. Of course, we're not in oversold yet, which means it is possible we could go a bit lower, but ultimately we have seen a decent reset over the last few days, and we're now actually starting to see a bit of a bounce in the short term from this key area of support that's worth paying attention to, because we've seen multiple important bounces from this exact area on the price chart over the last 1 month or so. And this area is sitting in between around 1910 to 1930. So just above 1.9k is a key area of support, at least in the short term. And if the price confirms a break below the area, and especially if we fail to get back above that area, in that situation, it would likely retrace back down towards these local lows, closer towards just above 1.8k, that level of support that I mentioned earlier. And once again, Ethereum will still likely perform somewhat similar to whatever Bitcoin does in the short term. So let's just say if over the next day or so, Bitcoin is kind of just lacking momentum to either direction, showing a bit of weakness, but lacking bullish momentum, it is quite likely we'll see something similar for Ethereum. So yes, even though we're seeing a short-term bounce from this support, that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to see a huge high momentum movement towards the upside, unless, for example, the stock market starts to play out a massive bullish move that can really help Bitcoin and crypto maybe tomorrow, depending on what the stock market does when it opens back up again. But between now and then, over the next 12 to 24 hours, just expect the price to most likely hold above this support for Ethereum here, but not necessarily play out a huge bullish move. Kind of just hang around this area is quite likely over the next 12 to 24 hours. And if we're taking a look at XRP on the weekly time frame, of course, in terms of the longer term trend, we're still playing out the massive bearish divergence. So clearly the larger multi-month trend technically still bearish, but in the shorter term, we're still running into and still holding this crucial area of support here, sitting in between around $1.30 to $1.40. So continue to expect a lot of support in that area. But if the price actually confirms a break below around $1.30, and especially if we fail to get back above that area, in that situation, would likely see a move down towards around $1.13. And if we break below that level, the next significant area of support is in between around 90 cents to $1. But once again, at least for now, we're still holding $1.30 to $1.40 as the immediate support to pay attention to. And it also is worth pointing out that we're still trying to play out this oversold signal in the 3-day XRP RSI, which means most likely some more choppy sideways price action still to come in the somewhat short to midterm, talking about a period of days, possibly weeks moving forward. But remember, this is not necessarily a bottom signal. It's possible that this is just a shorter term relief, a short term break from all of the bearish price action during the larger bearish trend before ultimately a continuation of the trend later on. That is still a risk that we need to be aware of. And if we're taking a look at the price of Solana on the 3-day time frame, it's a very similar situation for Solana. Obviously, larger multi-month trend, technically still bearish, but the short to midterm situation is that we're still bouncing between this support and this resistance. First of all, we still have a lot of support in between around $75 to $80, and a lot of resistance, which really starts at close to $95, which is almost exactly where the price rejected from just a few days ago. So once again, we're still kind of just bouncing around in a bit of a range in the short to midterm during the longer term bearish trend, kind of like what we saw around December 2025. We're still in a very similar situation right now. And if we're taking a look at the shorter term moves here on the 4-hour Solana price chart, we're playing out a shorter term bearish divergence with higher highs confirmed in the price, lower highs confirmed in the RSI, which is a sign of weakness, lacking bullish momentum. So we're still ultimately playing this out in the shorter term. And we do have a bit of support around this area at give or take $82. But if we start breaking below that area, it's likely we'll continue towards this massive area of support down here, sitting in between around $75 to $78. But like I said earlier, really in between $75 to $80 as the key area of support to watch out for. And remember, it's quite likely that Solana will follow similar price action to whatever Bitcoin does in the short term. So let's just say if Bitcoin kind of chops around sideways, but shows a little bit of weakness, maybe just a slight little move towards the bearish direction over the next 12 to 24 hours, it's likely we'll see something similar to that for Solana, showing a little bit of weakness, but not necessarily a huge crash in the next 12 to 24 hours is ultimately my prediction as a very likely scenario for the price of Solana. But remember, whatever happens in the short term, we're still ultimately in this range on the 3-day time frame, which is occurring within the much larger bearish trend. So that's still the situation across the different time frames. And if we're taking a look at Chainlink on the 3-day time frame, it's a very similar situation here. So I'll keep this quick. Once again, we're playing out an oversold signal on the 3-day Chainlink RSI, which means we're most likely going to play out more choppy sideways price action or just a slight little bullish relief, as we have been doing pretty much every day over the last 1 month as expected. But remember, at least for now, it's possible this is all still occurring within the much larger bearish trend. We've not yet fully confirmed the end or the reversal of the longer term bearish trend here. So we're potentially still in a similar situation right now compared to what we saw near the end of 2025. But with that being said, if we're zooming further into the short term, taking a look at the 4-hour Chainlink price chart, we can see that right now the price of Chainlink is somewhat stuck around this area on the price chart, sitting in between roughly $8.50 to $8.70, give or take. So expect some support around this area. But if we fail to get back above $8.70, it's possible this could soon start to act as a bit of a resistance in the short term. So basically, the price is kind of just stuck around that area, at least for now. But if we continue the break towards the downside, especially if we start rejecting here, in that situation, the next significant area of support in the short term is in between around $8.05 to $8.25. And as for resistance, I'll start to expect a decent amount of resistance here if we were to see a further bounce. And that resistance I'm talking about is sitting at almost exactly $9. But honestly, over the next 12 to 24 hours between now and the stock market open, it's likely we'll show a bit of weakness in the shorter term, but not necessarily a huge crash. So basically, price action kind of like this is ultimately what I expect just in the short term in the coming hours, maybe over the next day. And then once again, depending on how the stock market performs when it opens back up again, that can help determine the next major move for Bitcoin and crypto. And remember, if you want to trade any of these moves in the price of any crypto, check out the links below this video to those exchanges if you want to take advantage of massive bonuses only available using those links to certain exchanges. And if you want to actually know how you can trade at these moves no matter what direction the price goes, then make sure to watch these videos popping up right here on your screen, because the video in the top left shows you how you can profit from bullish or bearish price action using long positions or short positions, and the video in the bottom left shows you how you can easily profit from choppy sideways price action. But anyway, that is everything that I have to say for today. I really hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next video.